Next up is Gunnar Steinn Valgardsson and Hrafn Thorisson, and they will tell us about some work of theirs that is maybe a bit different from the other talks here, which are mostly scientifically motivated, and this one plays on the border of technology and art.
Okay, so as he mentioned, my name is Hrafn and this is Gunnar. We're both students of computer science at Reykjavik University, but are also working on several projects for the Icelandic Institute for Intelligent Machines, one of which we're going to tell you about today. But before we begin, I think it would be best if we show you just a brief video to illustrate. So this is a typical example of, this is something we all know. We're walking, there's a shadow of us projected onto the wall, given there's a bright light source behind. But actually what we were looking at is not the shadow of the person. It is actually a computer-generated image of a person after a computer vision software has analyzed the outlines of the person and transformed it into a virtual representation of the person walking. So that was actually a projection from a regular projector projecting onto a wall. And so in essence, this is more of an art installation rather than an experiment in technology, although there is some powerful artificial intelligence software running behind the scenes. And this is more of a visual experiment. And it falls under the category of spatial augmented reality, which is, in short, using projectors or other things to modify objects in our environment, making them interactive, or in this example, taking a physical object, like a person, and something that we see that is commonplace, which are shadows, and using these two to create something new, a new visual experience that perhaps will be interesting to watch, to see a shadow morph or change or act on its own. And that's what we want to do. We want to give them a life of its own, as well as just reflecting the person. And here we can see basically what the setup will look like. This is concept art of a person walking past the installation. This is just a wall, and we see a projector up there, and he sees his own shadow there on the wall. But as he's walking by, he might notice something strange about the shadow, and suddenly the shadow stops. So that's the kind of feeling we want to try to produce. Make this as realistic as possible, so that you kind of get a Twilight Zone feeling while you're walking past, and amongst other things. And just to show you another example of what can be done. This is a very simple example, and these are from a prototype version of our software. We recently started working on this, so keep that in mind, and these are all videos of prototype projects. But this is just a simple, funny mirror effect, but you get the idea. There are a lot of options about what can be done, and some of which we'll show on concept art images later. Just to explain a little, the shadow is actually what we refer to as an avatar. When you're playing a computer game and your character on screen, that is your avatar. That is what we call an avatar. It's an embodiment of you in a virtual environment. So the shadow is an avatar in the sense that suddenly there can appear virtual objects, other shadows of other things that your shadow can interact with. Touch, maybe. Kick a ball that comes rolling into the screen. So it's both something you can control, but it's also capable of making decisions on its own and acting on its own. And that's where the artificial intelligence comes in. He might suddenly just decide to stop and walk away, find someone else. Okay, so this is, for example, one demo we're working on where the world is a balloon and the user can use the shadow to toss the balloon around. Okay, if you continue. Yeah, for a few other examples of what can be done is, for example, this, a person sees a newspaper projected onto the wall, can pick it up with his shadow and open up the newspaper, and actual news headlines would be flowing over the newspaper itself, so he could read on screen what his shadow is holding up. So this could be live, this could be Morgunblaðið, front page of Morgunblaðið there. So there's a lot of different and interesting things that could be done with this. Here's another example. Dog walks in, you want to pet him, end up having to shake it off you. Yeah. Here's another thing, and this is more complex and more future possibilities, but it's an interesting technology. It's projection mapping. In this case, this is from the movie Frighteners, but let's imagine that the shadow is trying to get out of the wall. Because the system we're using or creating, it tracks where the person is and where his head is, we can actually make it appear illusion of there actually something protruding from the wall. Because as a person moves, the software knows how to turn or rotate the model so it appears as if you're looking at it from different sides as you move, getting basically the Michael J. Fox effect there. Yes, and on that note, I'm going to allow Gunnar to take the rest.
Okay. So our first installation of this will be at the second floor of Reykjavik University, where we will place the same installation as you saw in those videos, where anyone can come and interact with its own shadow and have all these interactions appear. Later installations that we are planning on doing, we are collaborating with the artist Katrín Ólína, who makes all these shadow creatures. And here you can see some examples of her art. And the idea is to kind of get these characters alive into a scene with your own shadow, so you can interact with these characters in all sorts of ways. The next thing that we are sort of planning to do is to make a networked version of this. So, for example, let's say we have an installation in Japan and an installation in Iceland. A shadow in Japan could wave to a shadow in Iceland, sort of getting this interaction between different countries and cities and everything. And finally, we want to, of course, release this open source so that anyone can contribute to this project later on, when we sort of have a more stable framework for doing all these things. In the end, we like to show you a video of our sort of first character interaction that we've already done. So here you see, it's actually only the picture of a shadow, but this is actually a person that is behind there, like in the other videos.
Just took it from this angle because it was easier to see what was going on, but there is actually a person standing here to the side.
Yeah, so yeah.
Okay, so this is another example of how the interactivity can be and how it can merge our realities. I mean, if the spider starts crawling on you and suddenly appears here, it gives you a kind of sense, you know, that there's something on you. That's one of the effects we'd like to try to produce. So we thank you for listening, and are there any questions? computer says no. Yeah?
This technology is portable in the sense that you might want to have a screen, but also project on a wall everywhere. Just like your box that creates all of this, wherever you want.
So you're asking if we can, like the open source version, that you'll be able to put it up in your own kind of setup and project it onto the wall. Yeah, that's what we're hoping for, that you can add to it, you can expand it, and that basically aside from the projector, the equipment needed for this isn't that expensive. So we're hoping that a lot of people might eventually start using it and perhaps even later on interconnecting all of them into a global network of shadow walls. But that's later. But in short, yes. Yeah.
So why shadows? Why not images?
Why shadows? Okay, that's a good question. Well, you've heard a person that is afraid of his own shadow. Well, now the shadow will empty your bank accounts without thinking twice. No, but because it's something that we see every day and we know it doesn't act on its own. So
Mirror image, you see it every day, it does not act on its own. It would be nice if it all of a sudden say,
yes,
brushing your teeth and you
that's of course the interactive part is more of an addition. You know, the shadow taking on a life of its own. That's another story. I mean, well, these are two different things. The mirroring can also be used with effects. You know, there can be a cloud overhanging the person walking by and just raining on that person alone. But just making this commonplace thing that is usually static and just do what you do, making it capable of more things interacting. So of commonplace objects, this is something that follows people and is connected to their personality trait, different types of people. So we're kind of, instead of having to find different objects to augment, the objects to augment are actually just walking by our experiment. For example, that's one reason. But I don't have a very solid answer to that, but we felt this was an interesting experiment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.